this camera is as big a jump as the Alexa was from everything previous to it. I think this camera is a jump just as big because of the dynamic range. Now, what that means to me on a practical level is my lighting package has changed entirely.
Welcome to Cinema 5D on the Go. Moving conversations about moving images with filmmakers and industry leaders. Brought to you by Tilta, Blackmagic Design, Manfrotto, and Olympus OND in association with Sony. This is your host, Nino Leitner.
Welcome to this episode of Cinema 5D on the Go. We are still here in Hollywood, California, this time with William Wages ASC. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
So we were here at Cinegear, and actually I think you were speaking for Panasonic.
Yes.
About the Varicam line.
Yes, exactly. The LT in particular.
Okay, so you have been, we just had a little chat beforehand, and you have been shooting a lot with the Varicam, as opposed to a lot of other, renowned cinematographers. Why is that? Why did you choose, the Varicam over the Arri?
Well, I had the opportunity to test it when it first came out, and immediately saw the advantages, which not only the color, which Varicam is famous for, but the dual ISO and the extended dynamic range. That is a life changer, and it changed everything about the way I work. Absolutely everything.
Was it difficult to convince producers to actually use a different camera to what they're used to?
Yep, I had to convince every studio, and I would have to shoot test footage. As a matter of fact, my favorite one was for a studio. We had a lot of night work in the city, so I went around the city with a camera shooting, and I realized when we got back to the studio that, you can't really tell. You don't know how dark the street was or the alley or whatever. So I set up a shot with three guys standing around a campfire warming their hands, and we tilted down, and it was one candle on the floor.
Oh, wow.
And that's exactly the reaction that everybody at the studio had, and went, oh, wow, yes, you can shoot with that. That was very graphic and explained to them. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
So, how many films have you shot with the Varicam so far?
Let's see, I've done 2 TV series and a feature film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And do they sometimes force you to go back to the Alexa, or?
No. Once they start seeing the footage and know that it doesn't change the workflow for editorial and all of that, no worries. Never a word other than, wow, this is beautiful.
You mentioned the dual ISO, so maybe you can explain this a little bit, what
Sure.
makes it special.
The camera, instead of going into gain to get to more sensitivity, it has 2 ISOs, one 800, one 5000, and with hardly even noticeable quality difference. The 5000 is my go-to position. Whenever we're indoors, it's at 5000, even if it's a day scene.
Interesting.
Because I'd rather shoot it at 5000 and dial in the ND filter, which is in the camera, which is very convenient. So I can balance things very quickly. If we're shooting an interior at the end of the day and it starts getting dark outside, it can give me so much more time, because I can open up the ND, dim the lights inside to match so that the outside stays the same, consistent overexposure, and it can give you another 45 minutes to an hour in that situation.
So basically there's no noticeable gain, like a noise in the 5000?
You're not going into gain. There's a phenomenon called shot noise that gets down to the physics of how light works, and I'm sure there's a very scientific way to explain this, but the way I explain it is that when you're shooting at 5000 ISO, this is like a night vision device, and you get to a point at these low light levels, it is so dark that each pixel is not getting the same number of photons. So that creates a random noise, which to my eye looks just like film grain. Because it's random, it's not mechanical.
Yeah.
If you go into gain, you start getting into noise instantly. So if you're at 800 and go to 1280 on any camera, you see noise. With this camera, if you don't go into gain, although you can, but you don't have to. You just click it to 5,000 and you're good to go.
Interesting.
It's beautiful. Now you can make what happens is 5,000 goes over a threshold point of into photon noise. If you create a LUT that overexposes about a half stop, which makes the camera maybe 3800 ISO, there is no photon noise. The threshold seems to be there, so you can make yourself a LUT that allows you to shoot at 3800, but in fact you're actually overexposing a little bit, and but you don't have to look at the overexposed image on the monitor, so you can keep it dark and moody.
So in practical terms, that means if I choose the 800 ISO and then I go up all the way to the 5,000 steps, so the ISOs in between would be more noisy than the 5,000?
Yes, because you're going into gain.
Yeah.
And now they keep updating the camera, and I think there is something about you can be in 5,000 and do negative gain or minus gain. I've never messed with it. As a matter of fact, I don't even do the LUT because I kind of like the noise. I think it looks like film. It's that 5,000 noise is far less grainy than high-speed film stocks.
Oh.
So people seem to fixate on grain because they don't remember film. Film was grainy as a dickens, and but now everything's so clean they just don't realize that.
Yeah.
Plus, with the 5,000, if you ignore all of this, shoot it at 5,000, make it look the way you want, one click of grain reduction, which does no damage to the image, and it's all gone. So my feeling is I've used it. I've used it a lot. The other thing, though, that nobody talks about that much is the extended dynamic range. What is advertised and said is, 14 stops? Is that 14 plus?
Yeah.
I think it's closer to 16. And it depends on how you analyze dynamic range. If you just put a LUT in and shoot and then go over and under and see how many stops you have, well, yeah, that works, but you're not using all the capabilities of color correction, of being able to bring the highlights down and lift the shadows a bit. So when you do that, all of a sudden, I think it's over 16.
Wow.
But it's all in how you analyze it.
Yeah.
People have a tendency to test these digital cameras the way you test film, which is valid. You can do that, but you're not using everything that the camera can do.
Yeah, I think for such a long time, the digital camera manufacturers were just trying to emulate what film looked like. And now I think they have surpassed that threshold a while ago.
A long time ago.
And,
the Alexa surpassed it.
Yeah.
This camera is as big a jump as the Alexa was from everything previous to it. I think this camera is a jump just as big because of the dynamic range. Now, what that means to me on a practical level is my lighting package has changed entirely. In the old days, I had a 40-foot truck with 18Ks and all of that stuff. Now, my entire lighting package fits in a Shorty 40.
Wow.
Which, if you don't know what that is, that's a stake bed with a box on it. So any place that stake bed can go, my entire lighting package can go. This is a huge time savings. It's a money savings because when we're in remote locations, you have to load a stake bed. So the guys come in early to do that, and then at the end of the day, you have to take it out and put it back in, and all the stuff's exposed to weather and everything. And I have to remember everything that I could possibly need, or it might be back at base camp. Well, doing it this way, we're good to go.
Amazing.
Everything fits in that. My biggest light now is an 1800 watt HMI because I don't need to fill outdoors the way I used to.
And even that you might be able to replace with a strong LED at some point.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not yet.
Not yet?
In the future. The problem is, what I like about the ARRI M18 is I can plug it into the wall here in the States. Overseas, it's even better because they're 220. But an LED doesn't quite have the punch that light has. It's very versatile, very small, easier to work with, and I can spot and flood it and get more punch, so I can do a shaft to sunlight. Normally I have 4 M18s, and then my main workhorse light in HMI is 800 watt Joe Licos, which is the 56K conversion to put an 800 watt HMI light in a Lico. And normally I have about 8 of those with all the lenses and everything, and I do most of my lighting for a day with those things. I love them. And then I have some LED lights and all. The big advantage of LED lights is you can run them on batteries.
Yeah, but they're
And
also
that's
coming
huge.
out with like Fresnel
But they're big.
LEDs. They're quite
They're
big.
big. Yeah, they're physically big. They're great.
Yeah.
They really are. The new Mole Richardson 10K is fantastic. And I can see a use of that in the studio, but for location work, I haven't needed it.
Yeah.
I have a survival kit of my stuff too that's small, a lot of it homemade LEDs and all that are, the only reason I do this is because they're not available.
Yeah.
Nobody makes them. And I have specific needs. So, matter of fact, I'll bring one tomorrow. Every time I show that to people, they love it. And this is all off-the-shelf stuff that I've cobbled together.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, how I approach outside, I'm lighting more with grips, with negative fill and bounce cards or bounce muzz. I like to use muslin because it feels more natural, unbleached usually, and stuff like that. So it's absolutely small footprint. I can fit my grip package with the exception of 20-foot pipe and a shorty 40 also. We usually end up with the grip stuff though in a 5-ton because some things are just too long to go in a shorty 40.
Yeah.
And but it's not full.
Are you worried about producers reducing budgets if they see like, you know, why is your package that much smaller? Maybe you can do it with even less next time.
Oh, there's always a danger of that. So you hedge your bet. I mean, I play games with them and say, look, here's how I'm doing it. What I try to do is get them to give me the grip, electric, and camera budgets. This is what I have. Let me divide it up the way I see fit. Some are reluctant to do that because the budgets with the studios are all compartmentalized. And I said, well, there's a workaround that you can do. It's all in your head, not necessarily on paper. So my lighting package will be a whole lot cheaper, but my grip package may require a lot more. Now, grip stuff is cheap, but sometimes it's better to have, 6 12 by 20 frames for green screens and all, instead of just having 2 where you're stripping things down and putting them back on and all.
Yeah.
Out of convenience. And if I'm lighting more with grips than I am with the electrics, then this makes more sense. And I can do that with crew too. I can, trade an electrician for a grip if they allow me to do that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In terms
It's about
of
time, really.
Yeah.
It's not about money savings as much as time savings. If I can eliminate, a 30-minute pre-call and a 30-minute overtime, that's an hour.
Yeah, which translates in money as well for the
Exactly.
production.
And so usually what I have found is when they see what I'm doing with this, once they finally understand it, they're freaked out usually at the beginning because they go, how can you do this? And but once they see how it works, usually by lunch the first day, they go, okay, I get it, we're good.
Yeah.
And they leave me alone. And because at the end of it, they're going to come out looking really good. And if they start trying to pull stuff away, then I'll go, we need a couple of 18Ks for this. I haven't done that really, but all you have to do is understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And where they're coming from is saving money. So I present this to them, not because I want to save the money. I really don't care. What I want is to make my work look as good as it possibly can, and these are the tools I need to do it. And even though they're not normal tools, leave me alone and let me do it, and I think you'll be very happy with the results. Like the Joe Licos are very expensive. So even though this lighting package is very small, physically small, it doesn't mean it's cheaper. Joe Licos are not cheap because usually the rental houses have to sublet them. They'll own 1 or 2, but they don't own enough.
Yeah.